Welcome to Dwayne's Guitar Lessons. I'm instructor Dwayne Jenkins. In today's video, we're going to be continuing talking about this book right here, this book that I wrote called Lead Guitar Wizardry, Volume 1. This is kind of a starter book on how to get started playing lead guitar. So if that's something you're interested, cool. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Lesson 3, which is your major scale formula and intervals. So if that's something that interests you, keep watching and we'll see what we can learn. Okay, now our very first scale that's most important to learn is our chromatic scale. Our chromatic scale is every note that's on your fretboard, okay? This is your chromatic scale. A sharp, that's your musical alphabet, the one that we talked about in the last lesson. If you haven't seen that, I'll leave a link below for you to check that out. Now that's every note next to each other, okay? 12 notes. These are the notes that everything's designed. So everything created in music is designed out of these 12 notes. Okay, so make sure you know those notes. Very, very important. That's your chromatic scale. Okay, every single note that's next to each other. All right. Now out of those, we're going to take 8 of those notes and we're going to make our major scale. Okay, our major scale is going to be 8 out of these 12 notes. So in the example that I put in the book, we're going to start with the A major scale, okay? Now, so that's going to give us 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? This major scale is going to be represented by our do, re, mi that we learned in school as kids, okay? I think if you go back to your childhood, you probably learned that in grade school. Do, re, mi, so it goes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, and you have 2 do's, the 1 and the 8. The 8 is going to start into the second octave. Okay, now in the key of A, we have 3 sharps, a C sharp, an F sharp, and a G sharp. Okay, so out of the chromatic scale up here, we're taking the A, the B, the C sharp, the D, the E, the F sharp, and the G sharp. Okay, those are the notes that we're taking out of the chromatic scale to form a major scale. Now you say, well, how do we know that the C and the F and the G are sharp? Well, because of our intervals. Now the interval is the distance between 2 notes. Okay, so this right here is representing our interval formula. Okay, W meaning whole note, H meaning half note, a whole step and a half step. A whole step is 2 frets, a half step is 1 fret, okay? So right here, this represents our note value, this right here represents our number value, and this right here represents our interval value, okay? Now, in the major scale, this is like a scientific formula, okay? Think science and math. That's what music really is. And they say that if you study music, it'll help with science and math. And this is why, okay? Because we're dealing with numbers and we're dealing with scientific formulas, okay? Now, if you master this formula right here, WWH, WWWH, that is going to be the magical formula for your major scale no matter where you're at on the guitar. On a fretboard or a piano, doesn't matter, okay? It's a formula that's going to give you the major scale every single time, no matter what key you're in, okay? And if you know this, it's going to tell you what notes here are sharp in the key, okay? So for instance, a whole step between the 1 and the 2 is going to be a B. That's 2 frets. Then we have another whole step, so that tells us that between this note and this note, this one's going to be sharp because if we look up here, we can see that the B is next to the C. That's 1 fret. But if we go 2 frets, we can see it's going to be a C sharp. So that tells us, according to the scientific formula, which is always going to be the same, that that's going to be a C sharp and not a C. Then we go a half step from here. So between the 3 and the 4 is only 1 fret. So that tells us that's going to be a natural D. Then we have another whole step between the D and the 4 and the 5. So that tells us that's going to be an E. Okay, so up here we can see 2 frets, it's an E. Okay, these are all 1 fret apart from each other. All right. Then we use this formula here to tell us what notes are going to be in the major scale. So we know our 4 and 5 is a whole step from each other. We know our 3 and 4 is a half step. And this is going to be every single time with any scale that you learn, okay? Now, if the 4 and the 5 is a whole step, there's a whole step between the 5 and the 6. Now, once again, since E and F are right next to each other up here, and we know that it's a whole step, 2 frets, so if we go 2 frets, that tells us it's going to be an F sharp. So instead of it being E to F, it's going to be E to F sharp because it's a whole step, which is 2 frets. And then we have another whole step between the 6 and the 7. So once again, if we look up here, 2 frets is going to be G sharp. So that tells us that the G is going to be sharpened as well. And then we have a half step between the 7 and 8, which is 1 fret, which tells us that it's going to be just an A. Okay, so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, and do. These two should match, okay? So if you go through this formula, you master this formula, you'll be able to tell the sharps in any key. I don't care if it's A, B, C, D, F, G, it doesn't matter, okay? And there's only 7 in the, well, unless you count the sharps too. So I guess you'd have 12 keys that you can find that in, all right? Now, if you, like I mentioned before in the other video, if you go up the scale, that's considered sharp. If you go down, it would be flat. So if you were going this way, this would be an A flat, G flat, D flat, okay? So a flat and a sharp are the same, all right? Master this formula right here. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, and you'll be able to find the notes in any single key. You don't even have to have your guitar with you, really. Okay, you could just write it on a piece of paper like this, and if you know this formula in between the notes, whole step between the 1 and 2, whole step between the 2 and 3, half step between the 3 and 4, whole step between the 4 and 5, whole step between the 5 and 6, whole step between the 6 and 7, and a half step between the 7 and 8. It's going to tell you this information every single time. And then when you try it on your guitar, you'll be able to hear that do, re, mi. Okay? If you don't hear the do, re, mi, it's not a major scale. It's some other type of scale. It could be a minor scale, could be augmented scale, diminished scale. There's about 1,000 scales out there, okay? But for right now, we're just learning the major scale, okay? Now, with this information, now we can look at what it's going to be like if we put it on our guitar fretboard. So here we got the, let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit. Okay. Now here we have our A major scale on 1 string, and I put it here on the 6th string. Okay, so A is at the 5th fret, our B is at the 7th, C sharp is at the 9th, our 10th is at, D is at the 10th, the E is at the 12th, the F sharp is at the 14th, G sharp is at the 16th, and the A again is at the 17th. Okay, so these notes up here are right here on your 6th string, and if you go through these frets, you're going to hear do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, you're going to hear that. That's the major scale across the 6th string. And it would also work on the 1st string as well because they're the same string. You just have a low E and a high E, and like I mentioned before, you want to know this information. This is really going to help you a lot, okay? And we can also play the A major scale across all 6 strings. Okay, so here in this example, let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit so you can see it. Alright, so in this example, I have the major scale across the strings in the 1st octave. Okay, so now we have our A and our B on the 6th string, then we move to the C sharp, the D, and the E all on the 5th string, then we move to the F sharp, the G sharp, and the A all on the 4th string. Okay, so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now we're playing this over 3 strings, the 6th string, the 5th string, and the 4th string, okay? And that's in the 1st octave. Now we could also do it in the 2nd octave as well, okay? If we look at this, I know this probably isn't the best presentation, but I think it's going to get you to understand what you're looking at here, okay? Just this, sorry. Alright, so now we have the same notes in the 2nd octave, and we're starting on the do on the 4th string that we stopped here. Okay, we stopped on the do here. That's where we're starting here, and we're starting on the 4th string, the do, and then 4, 6, 7 on the 3rd string, then 5, 7 on the 2nd string, and 4, 5 on the 1st string. So we have the A, the B, the A is on the 4th string. The B, C sharp, and D is going to be on the 3rd string. Our E and F sharp is going to be on the 2nd string. And our G sharp and our A are going to be on the 1st string. This is the A major scale and the 2nd octave across the strings. So if you were to actually play all of this, and this, you would cover all 6 strings with your major scale. Okay? So that's really, really important to learn. Okay? Very, very important to learn. Learn all this. I guarantee you it's going to set up a really good solid foundation for you knowing your scales. Alright, so to elaborate a little bit more on what I was talking about on the paper, okay, we have our chromatic scale, every single note that's on the fretboard, you know, every single one. Doesn't really matter where you start. You know, if we start here in A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp back to A, and then it would start all over again, okay? And it doesn't matter what key you're in, if you're in G, C, B, it doesn't matter, okay? They're always going to be in the same order. That's what's great about the musical alphabet. The notes always follow the same order. So no matter where you start, if you memorize that, you'll always know where you're at on the fretboard, okay? Very important. And like I said, the A major scale. So we have all those notes, and then we take the 8 notes out of that. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, back to A. And you can hear that. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? So if you hear that, you know that's the major scale, and it's very important to learn that. So the second thing I mentioned was playing it across the fretboard. You can hear that. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, so that was that first octave. 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 4, 6, 7. That's the first octave. And then if we start where we left off here on this do, on the 4th string, 7th fret, then we play the second octave. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. My voice isn't going up that high, but you understand what I'm saying. So now you have it in 2 octaves across all 6 strings. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. My voice can't go up that high right now, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Okay, so what can we do with this? Well, it allows us to train our ear to hear the notes. Okay, and we can do it wherever. And the thing about guitar is it's really breaking down in patterns. So if you learn patterns, think patterns with guitar stuff, you know, scales and stuff. Think patterns, it'll be so much easier to learn, okay? Now we can do this anywhere. If it's a pattern, if we understand it's a pattern and we know the pattern, we can play it anywhere. We can play it here in A. We can play it in G right here. We can play it right here in F sharp. We can play it right here in C. Okay, if you know that really well, get to know it very, very well, play it anywhere on the fretboard. Here on E, and it's the same notes every time. No matter what key you're playing in, it doesn't matter. And if you look at it as a pattern, then you get used to playing that pattern really well. There we go, you can tell when I hit it. You know what I'm saying? And then if you learn to do some alternate picking, which is what we're going to talk about in our next video, that's in lesson 4 coming up. That's guitarist to play over rhythm, that's lesson 4, and then lesson 5 is going to be alternate picking in octaves. Okay, so we're going to talk about some guitar riffs in the next video. But just work with that pattern, you know? Get to know those notes real well. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. See, and then once you get your alternate picking down, and you know that pattern really well, then you can do some really cool stuff like this. Of course, you don't want to drop your pick like I just did, but... Okay, that's what you want to work on, all right? So work on that, and just do it, you know, down picking for right now. If you know how to alternate pick already, that's cool. But if it's just down picking, just down pick it. and get it to where you can play it back and forth. And listen for that do, re, mi, and then try it in other keys. And then just try to improvise. And those first three notes right there, the first and second string, are those notes right there. See how I can do that? Make a little lick out of it. Okay, so work on that. So what did we learn today? We went over, our chromatic scale. That's all our notes on the fretboard. Then we take out of those 12 notes, we take 8 of them and make our major scale. And we learn our major scale across the fretboard. I'm sorry, along the fretboard is what I meant to say. Along the fretboard, and then also across the fretboard. In 2 octaves, okay? So make sure you can do that. Along the fretboard. So you could almost make a solo out of that. And your intervals, actually I messed up right there, but anyway, your interval is the distance between 2 notes. So that's what you want to master. The distance between the notes of the major scale. Whole step between 1 and 2, whole step between 2 and 3, half step between 3 and 4, whole step between 4 and 5, whole step between 5 and 6, whole step between 6 and 7, and a half step between 7 and 8. And it should sound like do, re, mi. Do, re, mi. And then you just master those intervals. Okay? Alright, so we'll conclude our lesson there. I want to say thank you very much for watching today's lesson. I really appreciate it. Be sure to visit my website for all the great stuff. A lot of great stuff there. And I'll put a link in the video, in the description for the last video. And a link of where you can get this book. I'd highly recommend getting this. It's a really good book to help you start off with playing lead guitar. It's kind of got a lot of stuff in there on how I learned how to play lead guitar. So I know it'll help you out as well. And I know you know how to play guitar, but maybe you know somebody who's just starting out playing guitar. Maybe they got a guitar for Christmas and they're just getting started. They can check out this book. This is the other one I wrote called Rock Guitar 101. This is a starter book. It's only about 7 lessons and it's full color. It's got all kinds of good diagrams in there and pictures. It shows you all kinds of good stuff on how to get started playing your guitar, playing rock guitar, okay? And I'll leave a link for that. So if you know somebody who's looking to need some help learning how to get started, that's a great book for that as well, okay? So thank you very much. Get that major scale down. Make sure you know it along the fretboard as well as across the fretboard. And then you'll be ready for our next lesson, lesson 4, which will be guitar riffs to play over rhythms, all right? That'll be our next one. So take care, and we'll see you next time.